grab a drink, grab a seat. There's plenty of space, especially now that the amazing children and youth have made some spaces for you. I might sit next to somebody you don't know yet. Ooh. Well, I break my neck. Oh, oopsie. Uh-oh. Health and safety. Legal Eagles, come and give me some help. All right, cool. If we haven't yet met, my name's Joel. It's great to be together. It's always nice just to be able to worship with one another and to learn more about Jesus. And if this is your first time with us, thank you so much for being here today. Also, if you are exploring what it means to be a follower of Jesus, we want you to know that you are welcome and you are at home. Everybody is on a journey. All that Jesus asks us to do is to begin to take one step at a time. And so wherever you are on your journey of faith, whatever you are discovering, whether you are angry at God or whether you're just curious about God, you're welcome here. And we want to be the community that allows you to give you space, welcomes you. You can belong before you believe, and you can discover who Jesus is and what he does, what he means in our lives. That's our passion, and that's our sort of heart and our desire. So welcome this morning. Thank you for being here. Also, have you ever noticed, you probably already noticed this, we as a society culturally, this is incredible, that they say that we are in some ways the most connected people ever. We're the most connected people ever, and it's partly to do with technology, it's partly to do with the ease of travel. We've got cultures that we visit countries much easier, people move across in ways that they didn't before, and especially because of our smartphones. And I've realized I've left mine over there, so you can imagine, but I do have one because we all have these smartphones. These smartphones allow us to do so much stuff. To get your global news. I have had so much happening on my phone already this morning, I'm sure, as you have as well, especially depending on your push notifications. You've got lots of stuff happening. You've got news updates, you've got stock market updates, you've got information about what's happening in the global economy, you've got information about what your friends did last night, you've got a cat meme again from that friend who always sends you the daft cat memes. You just get so much stuff, and it just keeps coming through and coming through. You can even order food, you can order clothes, you can book a holiday, you can check out places for lunch this afternoon. Basically we can do anything and everything in some ways on our phones, and we can access goods and never even have to leave our house if we wanted. There's so much on there. But the other thing is interesting that society is telling us, psychologists and people who look at human behavior, is that we're actually also the most disconnected generation ever. We have these tools that in some ways make us feel so connected, yet when they look at what's happening among humanity by and large, especially in the West, there's this epidemic of social isolation. We actually are answering surveys saying that we're the most lonely and disconnected generation that's ever come before us. And these types of words come up on the survey, and whether you say it's loneliness, what people say is, I feel so isolated, I feel invisible, I feel insignificant. These are common things that are being expressed, and maybe you've felt that, or maybe someone in your family, or maybe someone in your circle that you love and care for, you know this, they feel that. And we want to start to speak into that this month, but I want to say at the beginning, to be very clear and to be very careful, isolation is different from solitude. Isolation is when you feel cut off or excluded or ignored or invisible, or you don't have connections and you would desire connections, whereas solitude is intentional. Solitude is when you pull back to have some space for rest. You want to take a breather from all the noise. And solitude is healthy. Solitude is good. Solitude is maybe you recharge your batteries by having a quiet walk or turning your phone off and stopping all the noise. Solitude is good. Solitude is healthy for creativity. Solitude is healthy for your own mental and emotional well-being. But isolation is not healthy. And there's a differences between the two. So just to be clear, and we're not talking about whether you're an extrovert. You might have guessed I'm probably more in that camp. An extrovert who just loves people and wants to be around noise. And if you drive with me in the car, you got to talk really loud because sometimes the music is really loud. So I like noise and I like stuff. But my wife would rather be by herself, which is weird because I keep trying to say hello and she just ignores me. But anyway, no. So but she recharges. So this isn't about whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. We're not talking about your wiring. And introverts, if you're introverts, we've got a lot of introverts here. You're welcome, and this is a great place to be. Sometimes you don't feel welcome in church because sometimes church, you feel like it should only be for the extroverts. But we need introverts. And if you're an introvert who's wired that way, that's how God made you. And that's so we're not talking about extrovert or introvert. So please don't, as we talk about this theme, digging into what it means to be isolated or feeling lonely. I think it's helpful for us to just get out of the way. Okay, we're not necessarily talking about solitude. Solitude is a good thing, and it's not about whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. This is not a spiel to make anyone who's an introvert feel bad. We're talking about the social connections. It's the quality of our connections. That's the real issue. It's whether we have great friendship. That's the sort of title we wrestled with as Sam and I were planning this theme. And we want to talk about ways to improve the quality. And I want to give you some data points before we sort of move in a bit further. There's a lot of factors why they say social isolation is on the increase. You're probably already aware of lots of these things. I mean, but they say that one is the breakdown of the traditional family unit. Go back a couple generations, and having that connection as a family was really what people did. We have more and more people now who choose to live as single. People choose that. It's not weird in our culture. If you choose to live on your own, it's totally cool. A couple generations ago, that was weird. If you can choose to not have children. And again, that's totally cool. That's our culture. But a couple generations ago, that wasn't. You'd have been like some strange pariah to even think that way. So culturally, more and more people live on their own. More and more people choose not to get married, and more people choose not to have families. And traditionally, having a family was one of the things that helped with social connection. So again, we're not saying you have to have children, and I'm not saying you have to get married. What we're looking at is factors that have contributed to the way we are today. These are just factors, okay? Another thing, of course, is COVID. COVID has had a huge impact on people. It ramped up stuff that was already there. We had obviously Zoom and Teams are laughing all the way to the bank, right? But they existed before COVID was around. But these types of things, remote working, ramped up post-COVID, pre-COVID, it was already there pre-COVID, but it ramped up, didn't it? We also have a heightened awareness after COVID of a germ phobia. Mental health nurses will tell you that if you look at the people that have now greater issues with OCDs gone higher, reference feelings of ick from people has gone up. And a lot of it is to do with the fact that we got really frightened of one another at COVID. And so these are just factors, okay? These are just factors that contribute to us feeling more and more isolated. Economics, there's feelings like you don't have any hope, you don't have any future, education. It plays into lots of things. And of course, technology plays a huge role in making us feel disconnected. I'm just going to get my phone because I think it's better. So here's what technology does. So here I am. I'm at wherever, standing in a queue. There's real people beside me, and I can just get my phone out, and I can go anywhere. Yeah, I can start reading a book. I can check what's happening on the BBC. I can look at all the comments about what happened in the rugby. I can think, is Liverpool unstoppable? You know what I mean? I can go somewhere else, right? I don't have to actually engage or connect with anyone around me. And this is my beam me up Scotty, sort of take me out of here. And it tricks us in thinking that we are actually connecting when we're actually disconnecting. It's what it does. It's really good at it. And now I'm not blaming technology in the same way that we're not saying everybody's got to get married and everybody's got to have kids. We're just saying these are factors that contribute to a social isolation that's happening among us. And technology is not bad. Technology is an amazing thing. We need technology. Of course we do. But we have to be aware of what technology does for us, because it allows me to escape. And people are learning more and more that for us to flourish as humans, that we're not just brains on a stick, or we've got feelings and emotions, and our what happens around us affects our whole being. We're all connected, and that's something that was always that way from a scriptural point of view, biblical point of view. You are a whole being, body, soul, spirit, heart, soul, mind, and strength. You are connected. All these bits of the way you're wired are connected, and what happens in our physical stuff affects us mentally and emotionally and spiritually and socially, and we're connected, and it affects us all. And research shows that social disconnection, and we've got a lot of posters. There's 12 different posters around the building, so you can have a little look later on, which has some data points about how social isolation actually affects us physically, mentally, and socially. It affects our health. It's mad. It affects social isolation. They say they found heightens increases your risk for like heart attacks, heart disease, dementia. It's crazy how it actually affects us physically. And I'm not going to go into all the points, but if you're curious, please have a little look. There's a little QR code you can scan. There's posters, as I say, around the room. And I want to read a couple of quotes for you. It says this: isolation and loneliness is linked to early deaths. Its health impact is thought to be on a greater par with other public health priorities like obesity and smoking. Isolation is associated with a greater risk of inactivity, smoking, and risk-taking behavior, increased risk of coronary heart disease, stroke, increased risk of depression, low self-esteem, sleep problems, stress responses, cognitive decline, and an increased risk of Alzheimer's. I haven't finished. What's more? Feeling lonely can make a person more likely to perceive, expect, and remember others' behavior to be unfriendly, which can increase social anxiety and cause them to withdraw further, creating a vicious cycle. And there's the source where that quotes come from. HM.gov did a loneliness strategy. They published a big plan in 2018, and this was what they put on their details. And this is also affecting our young people. Listen to this. And you can get more information, as I say, around the room on these posters. According to the NHS, the Mental Health of Young People and Children in England report, this is from 2023, that currently states that 1 in 5 young people, aged 5 to 25 is now the definition of young people, 5 to 25, experience a mental health problem. 3 years ago, it was 1 in 6. 3 years before that, it was 1 in 9. And we've also learned that as we grow into adulthood, building connections actually gets harder. If this is the state of play for our young people, as they get older, we know socially it gets harder as we become adults. Here's a silly little example. Like, when my kids were little and they would like at a birthday party for their school, like in the year 3 or year 2 or something, like you just invited the whole class. I look at these photographs of my kids' early birthday parties, and I'm like, who the heck are these people, right? Like, I have no idea who any of these kids are, except, oh yeah, that one, I remember that one. Like, I have no idea who these kids are. And the thing is, as you get older, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And some of us don't even celebrate birthdays anymore because you reach a certain stage where it's like, yeah, it's just another day, right? Great socks again. Anyway, it changes, right? And what happens is when you're at this age, when you're younger, everything you do, social interactions are about exploring the world and discovering things and finding out more about life. And they're teaching you about colors and all different types of things. But as you get older, instead of learning in a collective way, the more you effectively have to streamline your learning. You streamline into the subjects that you want and the things you want to do. And what happens is, it's not intentional, but it can impact the way that we begin to view things. And all of a sudden, I don't really learn as collectively or support collectively. I have to do things on my own. I have to make things happen for myself. I'm an individual. I've got to work it out. I've got to make life happen for me. And we become more and more individualized. And again, this is just highlighting the way things are. But as we get older, it becomes harder and harder to connect and effectively really to make friends. And what happens is we then become, as an adult, this is the way we totally engage with one another as a very general statement. Everything we do with each other is practical, functional, and transactional. And I already said about like some cultural changes about relationships, but think of it like this. Just consider for a moment the most intimate human physical expression you can have with somebody, sleeping with them, having sex with somebody, is actually a commodity where you swipe right and swipe left. Even your closest connection is Tinder, Grindr, whatever, whatever you use. Like, please don't use those, by the way, sorry. But culturally, it becomes a commodity. What historically was a committed relationship and a committed connection, we essentially commodify. Because as adults, we treat one another in a way that's practical, functional, totally transactional. Now, those things in and of themselves are not bad, of course. I'm not saying that they're all bad. Yeah, because we have to be functional, don't we? Yeah? Somebody had to set chairs up this morning. That was practical. But we have to be aware that as we get older, the way we function as a default tends to fall into that camp. And these are lots of factors going on, and I've just sort of hit you with lots of information. But more than data points and more than information, because these could be problems that you're already aware of. The thing is, every number has a name. And maybe it's somebody in your family. Maybe it's somebody in your circle of friends. Maybe it's someone that you care about deeply, and you know that they are experiencing this type of reality. You know that they are struggling with these challenging feelings. Or maybe it's even closer. Maybe it's you. At the end of all of this stuff is people. Is names. It's not numbers. It's people. And we want to create a culture. We think as followers of Jesus that we can be the kind of people that live a different way, that model something different. And we want to do that. It's not going to be easy, but that's what we want to do. And in fact, this isn't a new problem. This isn't a new problem. This is the oldest problem in the book. And whether you are aware or believe in the creation story in Genesis, we did some stuff on Genesis last Sunday, actually. In the story of the Bible, there's this story of God in creating stuff. And you might not be someone who believes in creation, but wherever you land on how the world began, the important thing to understand that this story is Genesis is not a science textbook. What it's telling you more so is God's heart and who God is and what he's like. And essentially you have let's do a line down the middle. What we have on one side is we have chaos. And then God makes order. This is the pattern throughout the whole story. This is the pattern throughout the whole of the Bible, that there's a God who takes what was chaotic and he brings in order to it. And he's going to do something. And here's what happens in Genesis 1 verse 26. It says this. It says, "Let us make humanity in our image, in our likeness." So I guess the question is like, okay, who's the us? Who's the our? And the kind of a understanding scripturally is this thing about, we call it the Trinity, I feel like, and this little symbol. It's not very good, actually. Looks more like a rocket ship. Anyway, there's this thing called the Trinity, which is like the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, the three in one. And there's this community and understanding, or scriptural understanding of who God is, and this is what his nature is like. So that's the plurality. Let us make mankind in our image, and I don't have the space, so I'm just going to put FHS, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So here we've got God, and he's taking, God designs to create humanity, in his image, to reflect him, to be like him. We've got chaos on one side, we've got not good, we've got good. Yeah, we've got think about broken, repaired, restored. You know, the narrative of God's heart is he's one who takes what was broken and chaotic and he brings order. What is not good, he brings that which is good. And then, before anything went wrong, because he made this incredible world, he put all these things together, and before anything goes wrong, there's a problem that he has to deal with, and the problem wasn't sin. The problem wasn't us screwing everything up. The problem wasn't like people being unkind and murdering each other, because that happened a bit later, and it wasn't to do with people disobeying what God said. Again, that happened a little bit later. There was a problem that had to be dealt with. The first problem that had to be dealt with, sorted, addressed by God in this story is isolation. It says in Genesis 2:18, it's not good, 2:18 and 20, not good for man to be alone. And no suitable helper was found for him. It was not good. Not good. The word man there is Adam, is a Hebrew word, which means humanity. It doesn't mean male necessarily. We interpret it that way, but the word is bigger in Hebrew. It means humankind, if you like. Humanity, to be alone. The word alone there is like to be cut off. It doesn't mean by yourself, because sometimes it's good to be by ourselves. It doesn't mean just being by himself. It means it's not good to be isolated, cut off, separated, feeling ignored, isolated, or insignificant. It means that's what it means. But see, humanity was intended because they wanted to make humans, ta-da! Wanted to make humanity, male and female, that God created male and female to represent God, yeah? We're made in the image of God. We're made in the likeness of God. And it can't, so humanity is designed to represent its creator. And humanity was created by and for and from relationship. And we're not reflecting God's heart when we live in a place of chaos, brokenness, things that essentially are not good. We're not reflecting God's heart if we're living in this side. So he's made a way for us to be in this side, repaired, restored. And so we're going to dig into it, because humanity being isolated doesn't reflect the heart of God. That's why as followers of Jesus, we should have a voice into this vacuum, into this brokenness that's all around us. And so God did something about what was broken or not good, because the only thing he said out of all of creation that was not good was for humanity to be isolated, cut off on its own. And so God did something about it. He puts Adam to sleep, and he takes from his side, as the story goes, he takes a rib out of Adam, and he forms it into a woman named Eve. And that's my phone. Oh my word. No caller ID, right? One of you, no, right? And we go to silent. Sorry, God. No, just kidding. So this is cool. And I have to I'm just going to land for a moment on this, because this is a little bit important, and maybe we'll dig into this a little bit later in future. But from the same substance, humanity, male and female, was made from the same substance. You didn't take a different piece of dirt to make Adam and a different piece of dirt to make Eve. So the same substance both are made from. And then there's this word there. It says no suitable helper. And sometimes helper doesn't help us, because the word helper sometimes gives us the idea that somebody comes alongside and just assists, or becomes like a subservient worker in some ways. Someone who is a second in command to the boss, but the text doesn't have anything inferenced or in that at all. In fact, the Hebrew word for helper is a word called ezer, if that's how you pronounce it, E-Z-E-R. And what that word is used 21 times in the Hebrew scriptures. 2 of the times it refers to Eve. 3 times it talks about other military armies coming alongside like allies for the battle. 16 times it talks about God. He is my help and my strength. I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? Oh, God, our helper. So it is not used in a way that's subservient or in addition to or second in command to. You know, I mean, God's not second in command, by the way. And overwhelmingly, the majority of the way the word is used is to describe God, to call out to God to be our helper. So there's an understanding that we've lost over time because we read it to think somehow there's a dichotomy between the male and the female, and actually God equally commissioned both of them, equally created them from the same substance with the same command, the same charge, the same authority to get on and do what they were supposed to do. And again, that's a bit of a side note, but collaboration and working alongside one another, being a family, was the original model for community. That was the original intention, the original design. And of course, we've gotten pretty far from that. And we know it's tough, it's hard to work together. You know, a couple generations later, our kids are killing each other and all sorts, okay? I mean, that's humans for you, right? But just because humans mess it up doesn't mean that that's the way we should continue to function. And just because we get it wrong doesn't mean we should continue to function in that way. We should lean into the original design. Lots of stuff, right? But I just want to give us a few scriptures to show us that this has been God's plan and design from the very beginning. Because we read the rest of this is in the Old Testament, we begin to read the New Testament, and you begin to discover the way that Jesus talked about stuff and the way things were talked about was in a family language. And there's this cool verse in Psalm 68:6, and it says, God places the lonely, God sets again, lonely in that text means isolated or solitary or cut off. God takes that which is solitary and isolated, and God takes the isolated and places them into family. So God takes the isolated into family. Yeah? Or the solitary into community. You see, this is the plan. This is his strategy. God takes that which is on its own and connects it into something bigger than itself. And when you read the stories of how Jesus taught his disciples and spoke to them, he's there with them and he's teaching them. They say, teach us how to pray. And then he says this in Matthew 6, verse 9. This is how you pray. And maybe you heard this from when you were in school, or maybe you've been in church long enough to know this. And Jesus teaches the disciples and he says, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. The first thing he's teaching them how to pray, he says, our Father. You know, the language is familial, our Father. Later on in Matthew 12, there's this story where basically Jesus' mother and brothers or sisters are there, and they're like and Jesus is teaching, and then somebody says, hey, Jesus, your mom and your brothers and sisters are here. And then he turns and he says, wait, who are my brothers and sisters? Who's my mother and my brothers? And he turns and he points at his disciples. Not the crowd listening, the disciples, the close ones, the friends that he's got with him. He turns to them and he says, hey, these here are my mother and my brothers. I mean, it must have been women disciples if he's going to say either that one of the guys is being called something that he isn't, right? There were female followers for Jesus, by the way. So anyway, here he's saying, this is my mother and these are my brothers. He's using familial language, connection language. He's talking about things that are on this side. He's connecting people from all different backgrounds. He's connecting them into community, into family. And then the early church, I love this passage. The early church, Paul writes this letter and he's talking about what it means to be a follower of Jesus and what it is like when you join in, if you like, and jump in. And it's Romans 8. And he says this, it says that you're not a slave to fear. You're no longer a slave to fear. This is not how we live anymore because you're adopted as children. And you can now cry out, Abba, Father, which is like saying Papa, Daddy. You know, the Hebrews couldn't say the name of God. They couldn't write it down. And yet in the New Testament, we're said to use the name that the babies used to call him. Abba, 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 Papa. It's beautiful. He's telling the new believers, Roman believers, groups in Romans, saying, hey, and his spirit confirms with our spirit that we are his children, that we belong, that we're part of this family. Okay, it's the language of relationship. It was so important to the early church. And then you read another example, just to give you another sort of highlight things. And there's this guy, Timothy, who was an early church leader, and he's doing some work in Ephesus. And if you study the church history, there's a lot of mess going on in Ephesus. He had a lot of things to deal with. He had a lot of problems to address, and he's got to deal with some of this stuff. And basically, even though you got to deal with a bunch of stuff and address some false teaching and address some really some dodgy stuff happening that wasn't healthy and wasn't right, and he had to speak into it, and he had to correct it, and he had to do all these things. And Paul's writing to him. And even though Paul doesn't say, oh, don't ignore it. Paul doesn't say, don't do what you need to do and don't stand up and say what you need to say. Paul says this. He says, when you've got older people, speak to them like they're your father. Treat younger people like your brothers. Treat an older woman, honor her as if she were your mother, and younger women as sisters. So even though you have to address something, even though you got to speak into something, you do it from a place of family. You see, this language, this familial connection, this familial language is all throughout the scriptures. And I just picked a couple different examples to give you some different kind of insights, but it's so important. And the early church is made up of people from various walks and lives and cultures, and it's incredible. We're going to look at that in a few weeks, about the beauty of sort of international diversity and the beauty, the kingdom, the radical kingdom that was going on. And we'll look at that in a few weeks, because, let's be honest, we are living in a society which is becoming more and more tribal and more like we're building walls and resurrecting boundaries, and it's not really the heart of God. So we're going to look at that in a couple weeks as a topic, so don't miss that one. But God places the isolated, the broken into community, into family. This is his plan. This is his plan all along. This is how he wants to go about it. And how much better would our world be? How much better would our workplaces be, our families be, our relationships be, if we didn't live in a broken place? You know, if we didn't live, what if we could actually experience this and model this and share this with other people? You know? And how much better would that be for the health of our families, our children, the next generation? How much more healthy would that be for them growing up if we can model something like that? And some of us have experienced this because we know what it's like to have someone come alongside and help us, or carry a burden, or speak into a situation when we really needed it. When we felt like life was here, it was falling apart, it was breaking down, it was a mess, it was just, man, it's hitting the fan and it's going everywhere. Like, when we were in that place, we've had people that have come into our lives. You've experienced it. Maybe, I hope you've experienced that. I hope you've experienced what it means when somebody didn't just say, I'll pray for you, but somebody did something for you, right? I hope you've experienced that. And God's heart is for all of us to thrive and flourish. That's God's heart. His heart breaks. He breaks that there are so many people that are broken. That's God's heart breaks for that. His heart is for us to thrive and flourish. I'm not saying everything is going to be perfect. And what I'm saying is God's heart is for us to thrive as human beings. The Bible never tells us life is easy, but it tells us that you don't have to do it alone. That's the difference. It doesn't say life will be perfect. It doesn't say all your problems will go away. It doesn't say everything's now wonderful because you're a Christian. It doesn't say any of that. We talked about it the other week, didn't we? But what it does say is you don't have to do it alone. And I've got a model for how they don't have to do it alone. I've given birth to this community called followers of Jesus who should be demonstrating and living this. This is my heart is to take that which is cut off and isolated and place them into family. And when you're isolated, it's so easy to be more isolated because that's where you want to be, because that's where you begin to feel more and more comfortable. And it's hard. It's hard. You know that's hard. If you've experienced it, you know it's hard. Last thing you want to do sometimes is be around somebody. But we are created to not do life here in isolation. I want to read a quote from, this is from the U.S. Surgeon General. Said this in response to the social epidemic of isolation. And he says this: if we fail to build a more connected society and live more connected lives, we will pay an ever-increasing price. in the form of our individual and collective health and well-being, we will continue to splinter and divide until we can no longer stand as a community or a country, and instead of coming together to take on the great challenges before us, we will further retreat into our corners, angry, sick, and alone. You know, it's crazy. I mean, what a damning trajectory, right? This was from a few years ago. What a damning trajectory. But what if followers of Jesus could turn the tide? What if one by one in our circles, we could start to pull the plane up? You know, it doesn't have to crash. What if we could be, what if we could be the ones that do something about it? And so therefore, as a local church, we said, you know what? We planned this a while ago. We're looking at the theme and the series. We thought, you know what? Yeah, let's make it something that we're going to try to intentionally do something about. And a little bit later, in just a moment, we're going to hand out some cards for you. But so just a little teaser. It's coming in just a moment. But what if we took it seriously to cultivate and create life-giving relationships? What if we just took it on board? You know, God saw there was something not good and he did something about it. What if we could be like our Creator and see something that's not good and decide to do something about it, to not wait for somebody else, to not wait for a policymaker, to not wait for the economics to change, to not wait for, let's just do something about it. Can we be a people that live like this early community did and be these kind of people that make a difference and decide to do something about it? So we're going to make it serious. We're going to take it seriously. You know, it says 1 in 5 young people between the ages of 5 and 25 are now experiencing mental health issues. Man, I don't want the next time they do the data for that to say 1 in 4. In 3 years' time, is that going to say 1 in 3? 1 in 4? Like, what's it going to say? So therefore, I'm going to serve on the children's work team, and I'm going to do everything I can to invest in a generation to pull the plane up, because we're not going down. They're not going down on my watch. Yeah, I'm not going to let another elderly person live in isolation, because that can't happen on our watch. I can't wait and let somebody else do it for me. I got to pull the plane up. This is what the challenge is. So as a local church, we want to do something about it. I'm getting really practical here. If this is your first Sunday with us, I'm not always very practical, but today I am. So anyway, super, super practical. You know, as followers of Jesus, we have a unique voice. We have a unique voice into a world that lives here. And if you imagine this world, and it's kind of like a tangled mess. But over here is like a light bulb. You know? What if we could be people who have light bulb moments and help people untangle and live with a bit more light? You know, live with a bit more, understanding. What if we could help cultivate more life-giving, life-sustaining relationships? Everybody is created for connection. God has a strategy to meet people's needs, and he wants the followers of Jesus to lead the way. That's the bottom line. We've got to do it. And it happens when we forge deeper and more meaningful connections with one another. We move from here to here. And it will impact your mental health. It will impact your emotional health. And the data says it will impact your physical health. It's going to take work, but there's a benefit in doing it. So we want to make it a priority and a practice. So we got some cards. They're going to get passed out so if you pass them out while I'm speaking, that's cool. These cards are going to give you some really practical things, really practical stuff that we can begin doing. Now, we've also done it. We've added a page on our website. So if you go onto the website, if you click under Next Steps, it now has a whole page that we're building called Great Friendships, Building Connections. It's got some of the data points that I've spoken about already. But can we look at ways to be more practical? Now, here's a challenge for you. And if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, you can actually do this as well. You can do this same challenge. So here's a little challenge. Over the next 5 days, the first challenge is number 1, commit to connect. Just commit to connect. Number 1. This is a challenge. Commit to connect. Over the next 5 days, do something to build connections with people. And then the next thing, we got the slide for this one. The next thing, number 2, put it into practice. So we commit to connect, and we commit to do something about it. We put it into practice. And there's a couple things that we made up some stuff there. So we got some ideas. Practice gratitude, practice hospitality, practice generosity, and practice vulnerability. And here's some ideas for what we mean by that. Practice gratitude. Send somebody a text, a message, a card, just to say thank you for something they've done in your life. That's one way you can practically begin to build connections with other people. Just say thank you. Sociologists and psychologists tell us that when we learn gratitude, it helps us reframe the world that we're living in. And even if you're having a super rough, cruddy time, just do it. Practice gratitude. Even if you send a message, text message to somebody to say, hey, I really want to say thanks so much for this input that you've done on my life. I really appreciate it. Just practice it. Just do it. Connect with somebody. Practice hospitality. Just contact somebody to share a moment. You want to go for a coffee? You want to go for a walk? Want to come over for a meal? Want to go watch a movie? I don't know. Find a way to just do it. It doesn't have to be grand and expensive. Just in your setting, in your circumstances, find a way that you can practice hospitality. Maybe you work in the office and you're going to go get a coffee and you say to your colleague, oh, I'm just going to go grab a coffee. Can I get you one? You just practice it. Find a way to put it into practice. And we put practice generosity. Because the data shows us that when we begin to serve someone else, we actually benefit from it. There's a benefit. They benefit and we benefit. So find a way to get involved with something. Okay, maybe you want to get involved here at the church. That's cool. We'll never turn down helpers, but find a way to do something other than yourself. Maybe there's somebody that you know that you could just say, can I help you with anything? Is there something you got going on? Maybe you've got people in your life you just say, offer to help them with something. And then the final one is to practice vulnerability. Let down your guard a little bit with people that you trust. Okay? Be smart. Let's be wise about it. Don't just tell the person beside you in the line at Sainsbury's your deepest, darkest secret. Okay. Yeah. Be wise. Find somebody trustworthy, and just every so often, okay, get in the habit of not just saying I'm fine when they ask you how you are. Just say, you know what? Thanks. This week's been a bit. Some of you know me. Some of you know that I do this. I'll tell you, I won't sugarcoat it. I was having a conversation last week. Someone asked me how a week was, and I was like, it's kind of fair to middling, kind of just sort of down here a bit. Yeah, just be honest. Be honest with people that you trust. Be vulnerable. All of these ways, gratitude, hospitality, generosity, vulnerability, these are all from the heart of God, and these will all be things that help us move ourselves and others from this side to this side, moving from isolation and solitary into family and community. Let's do it. So you can scan the code, you can go to the website, and the last thing on there is the third step is reflect and share. So you got a little space on the back of your card. You can write on there. You can be like, here's what I did. Sent so-and-so a thank you card. How did the connection make me feel? Reflect on it, So this is a 5-day challenge. And we're going to be talking about this every week for the rest of the month. So you might get challenged again next week. You never know. So you might end up becoming the things that you do in practice, hopefully will become habits that begin to change the tide and pull a plane. That might be nosediving, might just pull it up a little bit. Can we be that type of people in this type of community, in this type of world? Super practical message today. We're going to wrap up in a couple minutes, but please, let's put it into practice. Let's do something about it. February is a great month to think about relationships. Let's do something actually about the relationships in our society as a whole. What can we do as the people of God? What can we do for one another? Now, hey, there's some new fused groups starting, some small groups. Maybe that's a place for you to start making some connections. You can find out all of that kind of stuff. Head to the website, scan that QR code, and there'll be lots more information on what you can do, what you can get involved with, practical ways that we can connect with one another. Now, if I've said anything today that really stirred you, provoked you, upset you, angered you, please come and speak to me afterwards. Let's wrestle this out as authentic community, okay? I'm just going to pray for you, and then we'll be finished. Heavenly Father, God, thank you so much for your incredible strategy. God, your incredible demonstration that which you felt like was not good, even though you made it, God, you did something about it. May we be people who follow your example and do something about it. God, thank you for your beautiful idea for community. God, that you designed us as human beings to be connected with others. God, you wired us that way. You wired us for relationships. Thank you so much for that. And God, I just pray for everybody here, whether they're on site or online. I just pray for everybody that you would be with each and every one of them. God, that where there's hurt, you'd help bring healing. Where there's upset, you'd bring comfort. God, whatever they're facing, whatever challenges is going on in their life, whatever questions need an answer, God, I ask that you would speak to them. And God, I ask that you would challenge each and every one of us to begin to live in such a way that we intentionally connect to build relationships with one another. Help us to be a people that show the world what you're like. Your goodness, your kindness, your grace. God, we love you so much. We honor you. In your name we pray. Amen. If there's anything I can do, if you have any questions, please, as I say, come and have a chat if we can help in any way. Please do. Got a few minutes now. Say hello to somebody. Put it into practice. Make a connection. Ask someone how they're doing. Touch base. Grab a drink. And then in the next 5-10 minutes at 12 o'clock, if you've got children across the street, they do need to be collected, please. So thank you very much.